Hello and welcome to Reading Together from Sea Harp Press. I'm Eugene Lunning, co-founder of Sea Harp, and today we'll be continuing our journey through C.S. Lewis's classic, The Screwtape Letters. This is a really lovely hardcover edition from HarperCollins. It's not part of the Sea Harp catalog, but we are huge fans of Lewis, as are many of you. So if you want to check out more content, we have plenty here on our YouTube channel, all kinds of mini documentaries as well as some beautiful readings around Lewis. Also check out his foreword to Athanasius's On the Incarnation, which is part of our Timeless series. Well, in this episode, we're going to be in letter number 11, and let's dive right in. My dear Wormwood, everything is clearly going very well. I am specially glad to hear that the two new friends have now made him acquainted with their whole set. All these, as I find from the record office, are thoroughly reliable people, steady, consistent scoffers and worldlings who, without any spectacular crimes, are progressing quietly and comfortably toward our Father's house, meaning hell. You speak of there being great laughers. I trust this does not mean that you are under the impression that laughter, as such, is always in our favor. The point is worth some attention. And before Screwtape goes into that, I'll remind you, it was just 2 or 3 chapters or letters ago that he referred to the patient being involved with these new friends who were quite flippant, who were, sort of so worldly that they brought just a scoffer's edge, and the scoffers laughed at practically anything they touched. And Screwtape was saying to Wormwood a few chapters ago, go after that. Keep this relationship close. Help our patient to start to lose his fire, his passion, because he sees that perhaps he's been a little too carried away with his faith. So that's a little context in case you didn't catch that particular episode. I'll continue. I divide the causes of human laughter into joy, fun, the joke proper, and flippancy. You will see the first among friends and lovers reunited on the eve of a holiday. Among adults, some pretext in the way of jokes is usually provided, but the facility with which the smallest witticisms produce laughter at such a time shows that they are not the real cause. What that real cause is, we do not know. Something like it is expressed in much of that detestable art which the humans call music, and something like it occurs in heaven, a meaningless acceleration in the rhythm of celestial experience, quite opaque to us. Laughter of this kind does us no good and should always be discouraged. Besides, the phenomenon is of itself disgusting and a direct insult to the realism, dignity, and austerity of hell. I like this opener here because jokes, and actually if you would look at this particular chapter, it's capitalized, jokes. That is part of the life of a human, and let's be honest, it really needs to be part of the life of a Christian. Jesus himself spoke with hyperbole. Hyperbole can be given in such a way that it's deadly serious, but when Jesus talks about having a plank in your eye as compared to a sliver in your friend's eye, that's funny. That's an image that anyone who heard it from Jesus' lips would have chuckled. Months later, when they wanted to judge their neighbor, they would have thought, Jesus, the plank. And that sort of imagery was as if a joke. Friends, you and I need to be the kind of people who can actually take ourselves not seriously, who have plenty of joyful inside jokes with those that we love, because we're creating history together. Jesus himself had laughter in his eyes. You cannot read the 4 Gospels and argue with that statement. Let's continue. Fun is closely related to joy, a sort of emotional froth arising from the play instinct. It is very little use to us. It can sometimes be used, of course, to divert humans from something else which the enemy would like them to be feeling or doing, but in itself it has wholly undesirable tendencies. It promotes charity, courage, contentment, and many other evils. And I'm sure many of you, if you are Lewis appreciators like me, you'll remember that he had a book called Surprised by Joy. So joy with a capital J is something near and dear to the heart of C.S. Lewis. Surprised by Joy is the journey of Lewis's heart from being what he was, possibly even a full-blown atheist, certainly an agnostic, all the way to being one of the greatest pillars in church writing in history. How does he say that he got there? Well, even when he didn't know Jesus, he had an inward experience of what he called joy, this ineffable, sort of heavenly experience of something that elevated his heart, his spirit, his mind into something he couldn't quite explain. That is joy. Joy bubbles up from the inside. I love that line. An emotional froth arising from the play instinct. And it is one door by which the Lord Jesus, the Holy Spirit, the Father, love to make their way into the human heart. So again, if you're a follower of Jesus and you are not joyful, you're doing it wrong. Let's continue. The joke proper, those are both capitalized, joke proper, which turns on sudden perception of incongruity, is a much more promising field. I am not thinking primarily of indecent or bawdy humor, which, though much relied upon by second-rate tempters, is often disappointing in its results. The truth is that humans are pretty clearly divided on this matter into two classes. There are some to whom no passion is as serious as lust, and for whom an indecent story ceases to produce lasciviousness precisely insofar as it becomes funny. There are others in whom laughter and lust are excited at the same moment and by the same things. The first sort joke about sex because it gives rise to many incongruities. The second cultivate incongruities because they afford a pretext for talking about sex. If your man is of the first type, bawdy humor will not help you. I shall never forget the hours which I wasted, hours to me of unbearable tedium, with one of my early patients in bars and smoking rooms before I learned this rule. Find out which group the patient belongs to and see that he does not find out. And in the same way that I just said that there is no such thing as a joyless Christian, friends, there's no such thing as a bawdy Christian either. Remember, our measuring mark is Jesus himself. So we cannot imagine Jesus looking lustfully. We cannot imagine him hearing a particular, let's call it dirty joke, and chuckling to himself and thinking, I'll tell that to somebody else later. We can't imagine it. It's impossible to imagine, and thus it must be impossible to imagine us being that way. This is not legalism, it's just fact. I'll continue. The real use of jokes or humor is in quite a different direction, and it is especially promising among the English, who take their sense of humor so seriously that a deficiency in this sense is almost the only deficiency at which they feel shame. Humor is for them the all-consoling and, mark this, the all-excusing grace of life. Hence it is invaluable as a means of destroying shame. If a man simply lets others pay for him, he is mean. If he boasts of it in a jocular manner and twits his fellows with having been scored off, he is no longer mean, but a comical fellow. Mere cowardice is shameful. Cowardice boasted of with humorous exaggerations and grotesque gestures can be passed off as funny. Cruelty is shameful, unless the cruel man can represent it as a practical joke. 1,000 bawdy or even blasphemous jokes do not help towards a man's damnation so much as his discovery that almost anything he wants to do can be done, not only without the disapproval, but with the admiration of his fellows, if only it can get itself treated as a joke. And this temptation can be almost entirely hidden from your patient by that English seriousness about humor. Any suggestion that there might be too much of it can be represented to him as puritanical or as betraying a lack of humor. Now, I will tell you, I am what's called an Anglophile. I love both Britain and a lot of things about it, their literature, their poetry. So I know a little bit of what Lewis is talking about here. Lately, I've been reading a fascinating book by Paul Fussell that's called The Great War and Modern Memory. The whole book, it might be one of the most fascinating books on World War I I've ever read. The whole book is about the sense of irony in the British sense of humor that Lewis is talking about here. But friends, if you're an American or from some other country, we all have this inclination. to be ironical, to be sarcastic, again, to be sort of flip about things, to look at a situation and try and turn it on its head. We might call it a Seinfeldian sense of humor, which my wife and I sometimes have. But friends, again, the measure of our tongue, the measure of our heart, the way that we judge and think about other people is measured against Jesus. So again, as we finish out this letter, remember that the way that we interact with humor, whether it's what we watch or the way that we internalize humor and then spout it off ourselves, must again set itself against Jesus. Is it like him? Does it honor? Does it bring a spirit that actually elevates the other or lowers them? Last paragraph. But flippancy is the best of all. In the first place, it is very economical. Only a clever human can make a real joke about virtue, or indeed about anything else. Any of them can be trained to talk as if virtue were funny. Among flippant people, the joke is always assumed to have been made. No one actually makes it, but every serious subject is discussed in a manner which implies that they have already found a ridiculous side to it. If prolonged, the habit of flippancy builds up around a man the finest armor plating against the enemy, meaning God, that I know. And it is quite free from the dangers inherent in the other sources of laughter. It is 1,000 miles away from joy. It deadens instead of sharpening the intellect, and it excites no affection between those who practice it. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape. I think as I was reading and sort of listening on your behalf to that particular letter, I like that ending. The idea that sort of our, maybe even call it our modern sense of ironic humor, the put down, the way that so much comedy today is frankly not even that funny because it's so sharp. That is 1,000 miles away from joy. Friends, the calling card of the follower of Jesus must be a deep-seated, contented, peaceful, and yet effervescent joy. It needs to look like the wild eyes that we can absolutely imagine in those Pentecost-filled believers on that first Pentecost. Our inward joy is the joy of Jesus. He's offered it to us. He's told us, my joy will be in you, and your joy will be made full. So for you and for me, I pray that today we would examine the way that we interact with humor, with comedy, with sort of the cultural moment we're in, and that what we would be about is the joy of Jesus, is the laughter, the fun that Jesus clearly brought to his friends, that would be what draws us in, and that would be what draws others in by their experience of it in us. Doesn't that sound like kind of a fun, joyful adventure living that way? I think it does. Thanks for joining me. We've been in C.S. Lewis's The Screwtape Letters. That was letter number 11, and I look forward to our next episode. Have a wonderful rest of your day.